I'm Robert McCready at Evening Magic on Twitter. MD Wheatley is a writer, a poet, a Southerner, a Kmart realist, a skater, a husband, a father, a brother. His poems appear in Hobart and in various other places. He's my friend, former church member, and current mutual follower on Twitter. Thank you, MD Wheatley.
Thank you for having me.
So, how do you start writing?
Um, it kind of just started with, it kind of started, I guess, like in a journal type way. Um, I like tried to journal whenever, so yeah, whenever like I was Christian, I would like try to journal and stuff because like, I don't know, I just feel like I saw other people doing that and I never really got into it. Like it never really picked up for me. Um, but I guess like fast forward and in more recent years, I kind of just and it's not even really journaling, but I would just open my notes app and just write thoughts. And most of the time it would end up being like in the form of like a poem or something. So that's kind of how it started. And that's still mostly how it always happens. Even now when I write, it's usually kind of like it's sort of just like hits me or like a thought or something will hit me and then I'll start like ruminating on it and then just start typing it like in my notes app, and that's really how it mostly happens. um I'd say that's how I got into it, but I mean other than that, like I mean I got into or got interested in like actually trying to write more from just being a reader. So just like reading a lot and being really into reading. um and I also think too, in recent years, some of the authors that I've gotten into, their writing, like when I was reading their books or reading their, poetry collections or stories and stuff, something about their writing just seemed like this sounds like I'm saying it's not good or something, but something about their writing just seems like, oh, hey, I can do this too, Like it was very approachable. It was very like not, I don't know, it wasn't like far off and it wasn't coming from a place of like, oh, to write like this you have to be like some classic author that it just always has been, or you don't have to you know go get an MFA in creative writing from so and so university. So I think that was a big part of it too, was I just started reading more authors that were more approachable and just more like, I don't know, inspired me to write really.
Anyone in particular?
Some of the really big early on ones for sure for me, were one of the big ones was Tao Lin. Um, Oddly enough, I read like the first book I read by him was his nonfiction book. Um, but yeah, he was a really early on one for me. And then also Scott McClanahan was like a really big one early on for me. And really also just like getting into like learning who Giancarlo was and getting into like Tyrant, like getting into Tyrant and like reading a bunch of their books or like a bunch of books that Tyrant published. That was for sure like a big one. And then also like it really, really getting even deeper into it and into like, I guess, more of the like really smaller kind of like online community of like Twitter writers and stuff. For me, I got into that um through Zach Smith's book that Tal put out like last year, or like Moo Moo House put it out. Was that last year or the year before? It might have been the year before, but it was Zach Smith's book. It was called Everything is Totally Fine, I think was the title of it.
I've heard that title, but I didn't know who wrote it.
Yeah, it was Zach Smith. That was like the first book that Moo Moo House had published in like 10 or something years. It was kind of crazy, but it was really good. And there was this one story in there that still to this day, I swear, I don't know what about it, but I like cannot read it without laughing out loud. And like I remember it was funny when I first discovered it, I was kind of going through like a pretty like dark time in my life, just like my life in general, not dark time, but just a hard time. And we like sort of had this ongoing joke amongst like, my wife and like some really, really close, like kind of more family than friends, but where we would like try to read this story out loud to each other without laughing. And it was like so hard, but it was so funny. And then also like on Twitter, I just sort of like made connection with him and he was like super duper nice. And like I shared with him my experience with his book and, how much I loved it and how like, yeah, just I don't know, just like how it really meant a lot to me, like that book and stuff and some of the stories I was reading out of it at the time. He was like super awesome and he sent me some books of his little press that he runs or that he did run at the time. I don't know if he still runs it, but he just like sent me some books in the mail and they were really awesome too. And I read those also.
Where are you zooming us from tonight?
I'm zooming you from my kitchen in Park Circle, North Charleston, South Carolina.
The Park Circle is a very popular neighborhood right now. And even though it's popular, it's still in the South and we're kind of isolated. Without, Twitter, we couldn't make the connections that we make. And it sounds like you're making some good ones out of your kitchen.
Yeah, for sure. That's super true. Like actually in the past maybe month or two, well, for one, I found you, which like blew my mind because like obviously I knew who you were from when I was a kid, like at the church and stuff. And also just on top of that, like your story being on Moo Moo House, I was like, whoa, like this is insane. So when I found that, that was super cool. I tried to find, I never really made, I guess, connections with more writers from South Carolina, but like, I in the past maybe year or so discovered like what Walk-A-Mall Journal was, which is pretty cool to see that like, somewhere down here is doing like a lit mag. And then I've actually I met this other guy recently on Twitter that's from South Carolina but doesn't live here anymore. I think he lives in California, but he's a South Carolina writer, so I just thought that was really cool. It's kind of like, yeah, I don't know. I'm like very much that kind of person where like and I meet someone that's like into something that I'm into or like doing something that I like to do and they're like from South Carolina, I like get really hyped on it.
Yeah, I
But
thought it was, I'm sorry. I
no
thought
no
it was
no.
really surprising when you hit me up. I was like, oh my gosh, someone that was from my little town of Florence is now in the same literary circle that I'm in.
I
And I thought
know
that
it's
was really
so
cool.
weird. Yeah, so cool. I also recently met this other poet in my actual neighborhood. Not I mean, didn't meet her like in my neighborhood, like walking around, but she lives in my neighborhood and she's a really, really great poet. She mostly does like haikus and stuff, but she's a teacher. She's like an English teacher at a local like a school down the road, one of the high schools. And she, like I said, mostly writes like haikus and stuff like that, but she just had a chapbook come out and it was really, really cool. She actually originally sent me the manuscript, not necessarily to publish it, but just to like see if I could try to like help her sort of like figure out like a fitting home for it or something like that, or if I had any ideas of places she could send it to. And then like a week after she sent it to me, it got accepted by Bottle Cap Press.
Mhm.
Have you heard of that?
I have.
Yeah, which is like I hadn't really heard of it when she sent it to me, but then I looked it up and it's like fairly large, at least on Instagram. They have like a really big Instagram following, and I mean, it looks like they're making chapbook like they call them chapbooks, but they look like pretty nice books. But they're making them like constantly, it seems like I want to say they put out a chapbook like once like two, at least one or two a month.
That's a
But
lot.
she put out a cool book just recently. It was called In the Name. That's the title of it, In the Name, and it's just a bunch of haikus on characters from I just thought, I mean, because I recognized the characters and the names, I just thought it was characters from the Old Testament of the Bible. but she said it's all characters from the Hebrew Bible. So I don't know if that's something different. I'm not sure, but it's
But
pretty
if
cool. It's just like yeah, it's just like these quick little haikus about characters from the Bible, and I enjoyed reading it. I don't really read the Bible anymore, but I enjoyed reading her book. It was nice.
I wish I could speak, I still go to church, and I wish I could speak a little bit more to try to interpret what she means by the Hebrew Bible. I know that the original texts were in Hebrew, and then there's something that was in Greek. And Jewish people read the Torah, which is the first five books of the Old Testament, but then the other books of the Old Testament, because a lot of times Christians say the Old Testament is the Jewish Bible, and it's not, only a few books of it. Jewish people use a lot of the Talmud. And I've actually got some Twitter friends that go to a conservative synagogue in Charleston, and they have Talmud study. And that's interesting. So I wish I knew a little bit more, but you've mentioned twice that you used to go to church or back when you were Christian, and I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about that journey.
Yeah, I don't want to get like super into it just because I feel like I'll ramble and stuff. Just because I don't know. Sometimes I feel like it's like hard to put exactly into words like my journey of what who I've like come to be as like a, now 31-year-old man. But as a young kid, I very much like sought out the fellowship of church because I was having a rough time in my home life. So I like kind of very much sought after it. I wouldn't even say I necessarily grew up in the church because I didn't grow up in a family that like went to church every Sunday or anything, which as you know is like pretty common in the South. Um, but yeah, as like I'd say as probably like a teenager, I sought out going to church as a means of I don't know, as a means of fellowship and as a means of like belonging and as a means of I don't know, like trying to feel love from, I guess, yeah, God I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what exactly I was doing, but I lived in that world and existed in that world for a pretty long time. The church world. I even went on to experience some very like hyper evangelical, like hyper Pentecostal-ish type experiences. Um, and I'd say that's probably what kind of like made me like initially be like, oh, this is not really my thing. Um, and then I don't know. I was in my like younger 20s. I married my wife. We both not I had lived a far away from South Carolina and from my family before, but me and her together, and it was her first time. We both moved to California and were very far from our family, and we just didn't like, try to go to church or find a church or whatever. And I feel like I want to say the better part of my time in California, I tried to convince myself that I didn't believe in God. I was like almost trying to convince myself that I was atheist or something. And then and then then I don't know. I think I just realized like my my being and my like true self is a very spiritual self. And I think that's why I always was drawn to, the church and God and things like that at a young age. And I think I spent some time trying to deny that. But then I came back as a more mature and older person and was able to, you know, accept that I believe what I believe, but then also start to form my beliefs on like really, really critical thinking and just what I think is, what I think is to be true for myself. And also, I think now more than ever, what I think and what I believe is very like personal to me and like just me and just what I believe. And I feel like, I don't know, I feel like for a long time I was meeting so many people, especially I don't know, especially like couples and stuff and like married couples and things where they're always just like, oh yeah, this is what we believe. And like, it's just like they by default believe what each other believes for whatever reason. I guess maybe they feel like there's a rule that says you have to do that, but I don't know. I recently hung out with like a friend um that is um a devout Christian, part of, pretty heavily involved with like even, like an evangelical church. He's actually like about to be a part of like a church plant or something, somewhere in South Carolina. And he was asking me these sorts of questions, and it was kind of the first time I had like spoken out loud about them probably ever, really. Well, in a really, really long time. Um, and I was just like, yeah, like this is what I believe, this is what I think. And then he was kind of sort of asking about my wife and like what she believes and thinks. And I was like, I mean, I don't know, man. You'd have to go ask her. Like you'd have to go see what she says or like see what she thinks. Like, you know. But yeah, I don't know. I I believe in God, and I believe, I don't know. I believe in kind of like I don't even know how to put it into words. I don't know. If this means anything or is of any like, substance to anyone and is more easily understandable, in the past like year or two, I've read a lot of Ram Dass. I've listened to a lot of Ram Dass. Um, I have read the Bhagavad Gita. I've read and tried to learn about other religions and other things. Stuff more like Eastern stuff that I would say is more Eastern spirituality versus like Western spirituality. And that has been kind of like a lot of my, I guess, like self-discovery or like self-learning things as of late. I don't know. I'm
I
just
kind of
trying to
I
think
want to
of a way
get
to.
into the I want to get into the weeds just a little bit
Okay.
about church and journaling. Do you think that some of your writing is channeled?
Channeled.
Have you heard of channeling?
I mean, I feel like I know what you're saying, but maybe could you elaborate?
Well, it's kind of an ongoing discussion. Some people believe in this getting in the zone state of being when you're writing or producing art or skating or doing something athletic. It's called getting in the zone. It's also known as flow state. And a man with a very complicated last name that starts with the letter T, I believe, he came up with flow state and studied it. And I think that might be a separate thing than channeling. There are other people on the New Age and even in the Christian world who believe in channeling, where an entity, sometimes it's Jesus, sometimes it is just the channel. D. Wallace says the channel gives her information, and people are just simply getting information and then putting it down. Doreen Virtue was a New Ager who converted to Christianity, and she believed that an entity was giving her information and she was writing it down in books. And she made a lot of money. There, I think it's different than being a medium, but
Mm.
similar. And so I like to ask other creatives when they're creating, do you think that you're in flow state? Do you think you're channeling? Or is it just your own mind?
I feel like it's mostly just my own mind. Um, but at the same time, that like sort of thought or that what you were just talking about, that scene, like I was saying earlier about like getting into writing and my writing process, it kind of does have this sort of feeling similar to that, but I feel like it's mostly just my own thoughts.
The another thing about journaling in Christianity is that Mormons encourage journaling, and Mormons also believe in the continued revelation of Jesus Christ. Most mainstream Protestants believe that it is done. There is no more revelation. So when you start to channel or when you start to journal, if you journal enough, you'll accidentally start channeling. And the next thing you know, boom, I got a Book of Mormon. Or boom, I've
Mm,
got the book Jesus Calling, which was actually a Presbyterian lady. She would journal her prayers and then she thought, well, this is one-sided. Let Jesus speak. And then Jesus spoke, and then she wrote Jesus Calling, which, Jesus didn't talk to her. If she channeled, it's probably another entity. And there's also another book that Jesus channeled through somebody called A Course in Miracles, and it is very new age. And
I
I
know
think
that
there's
book.
like there's many volumes, I think, and they got translated. Marianne Williamson does it. She's running for president, but that was Jesus also. Um, so, one time Jesus came down to earth and then died and rose from the dead, but now he can only just channel. He can just speak to someone and then they write out automatically. So it's a weird
Yeah.
concept.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I assume, I mean, who was the lady that wrote Jesus Calling?
I do not remember her name,
Oh, okay.
but
I
she's
mean, I assume
Presbyterian.
that her channeling, she credits it to like the Holy Spirit or something.
I think
If I
Jesus.
had to guess. Oh, she says just straight up Jesus.
I
Okay.
think,
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that.
and they sell it in the Christian bookstores.
I mean, yeah, Jesus Calling. I mean, sheesh. I've seen that book for years and years and years.
So you might
I
have
had family members that, yeah, I had family members that like carry that book around with them everywhere.
your instincts about what you were experiencing in some of these places might have been right. And I got into the new age pretty good. And there are some things that are completely indistinguishable from some churches that the new age people
Hmm.
do, as far as prophecies and giving you a reading and confirmation and things like that.
Yeah. I have a really close friend now, actually, that actually also happens to randomly be from Florence, but he lives here now. And he's like in my life pretty much every day, mainly because we work together, but we also do other things and hang out and stuff. But he is like a he's a Christian, a devout Christian, and he is someone that I talk to a lot about God and spirituality and stuff. And when I think of someone who I respect so much, like what they believe and their ideas and things about God and spirituality, like that is a dude that I like really think like just I don't know, has a very like supernatural understanding of God. And I think that's a cool relationship that I have, and I think has helped me a lot, at least in the last like year or so, trying to, I don't know, uh not decipher, be able to like actually think about what I think and what I believe, and be able to like speak it or put it into words. 'Cause I think for a while also it was just kind of like this like avant-garde, like these are just my thoughts and ideas and beliefs, but I can never actually like hone them into like speech or like be able to actually say what they are. And I
And
still don't really feel like I can, but like I don't know. It's something that I'm thinking about a lot, and it's something that I have a lot of thoughts about, and also I like inherently like I inherently write about God a lot or like mention God a lot. I don't really know what's up with that, but it just kind of happens.
he reveals himself. I have a
Yeah.
hypothesis about some of the spiritual confusion because I went through that a lot. There wasn't a lot of explanation for what we believe. Like, we knew the Apostles' Creed, but we didn't know how to think about
I, st-
Christianity.
I still remember the Apostles' Creed
Yeah.
from Parkwood Pres, like from that church. I still
Right.
remember all of it.
And not every church says it the same way. The Methodists, they don't have Jesus descending into hell.
Yeah,
They
I
have it.
I remember hearing other versions of it when I would like I don't know. I feel like one time I heard another version of it at like a funeral or something.
Mhm.
But
Well,
yeah.
I once asked, we've got a pastor now, Jack Humphreys, and he's in his 80s and he's a historian. And he was the first time where I could like see what he was talking about by the way he described it. And some of the things that I'll see on Twitter, he'll mention in church. So I know he's like cutting edge with the information that he's looking at. Um, and one of the interesting things is that well, I asked him about Jesus descending into hell, and he said, I don't know why they chose that word. They could have said Hades, they could have said this and that, but there are a lot of texts that aren't part of the Bible that describes the 3 days after Jesus died. And from there, we Protestants get our belief system. However, we don't know about these old texts. And so I was like, okay, cool. I buy that. That's why we have this descending into hell. And then other Christians that are Protestants, they're like, well, Jesus didn't go to hell. We're getting rid of that part. And they cut it without realizing while they're cutting. And what I found out through research and just really delving into things recently is that every Reformationist that left the Catholic Church were not leaving the Catholic Church and they weren't anti Catholic. They just wanted to change the Catholic Church. Martin Luther was not anti Catholic, even though he started the Protestant Reformation. And all these different people, John Calvin and John Wesley, who broke apart, they never thought that Christians would just get rid of everything they ever learned because the basis of where they got, over 1,000 years came from Catholic thinkers. And they had no idea that people would get rid of all of them. And we did. For instance, I learned about this word called ontological, and there are
Hmm.
ontological arguments. Have you heard of this?
Hmm.
I didn't know about it, but it's St. Anselm, and I've got a Twitter friend lent me a book. I'm going to read St. Anselm's book, but he said, if you can imagine a world where God exists, then he must, because you can't imagine anything else. Like, well, I can imagine a dragon. And then you go, well, is a dragon better than God? No. So it's impossible to think of something bigger and more powerful than God. And because we can't, then that means that God has to exist. And so I've come to the conclusion that either everything in the Bible is true or we're in a simulation where the Bible is the rule book, or not the rule book, but the kind of like the information. And I think those are the only two logical explanations I can come up with. The also, William Lane Craig, he does reasonable faith and he explains things that we have long forgotten. And he explains it in a way that's not, like when you go to a certain mega church in South Carolina and everybody just feels really good and don't and look at God and all this stuff. Like I don't relate to that,
Yeah.
you know, and so I need to have like I need to understand how my mind works because I can go days without feeling anything, I'm
Yeah.
kind of an avoidant personality that way. So William Lane Craig has been a really interesting person to look at and talk to. And well, not I don't talk to him, but I listen to him. I think he has a church. Like there's one church in Charlotte, but it's these little. I don't know if they're even churches. They might just be meeting places. For instance, um, he says um, that the genre of Genesis is mytho-history. It's a Jewish genre. And no one ever read Genesis literally until like a little over 100 years. They started reading Genesis literally. And so then people say, well, a snake can't talk. You're an idiot. And then we were like, oh, well, God can do anything. We say just dumb stuff like that. But what it would be like is if someone read a comic book about Superman and then said, a man can't fly and stop bullets. And then we would say to them, duh, it's a comic book, but America existed and these cities existed. You're not supposed to read it like it's literal. So mytho-history is a genre that tells the history in a myth form. And I might not be getting this exactly right, tells it in a myth form to make it easy to memorize, and it's all symbolic. Like snakes have scales, scales can reflect light, Lucifer reflected light, so that's it's all symbolic, not literal, but still the history. So someone could say snakes can't talk, you'd be like, duh, it's mytho history, it's not literal. But they do
Yeah.
that to then say, well, this can't happen, then it can't happen. Then it makes lots of other people say, well, I guess none of this is true. But you got to read it. I mean, as writers, you have to read things a certain way. You have to read auto fiction a certain way. You can't read it as totally fiction, and you can't read it as totally nonfiction.
Hmm.
What when you write, how much of it is inspired by your life?
Um, Almost all of it all the time. Uh, and I think that comes from also just, yeah, getting into the literature that I got into, especially in the last little bit, um, or in the last few years.
Oh, I'm having a Shirley Temple, by the way. What are you having?
I'm having a glass of milk,
Chocolate milk?
just regular old milk.
Is it raw milk?
It's not actually, but I just got 2.5 gallons of raw milk today, but I mostly save the raw milk for my daughter because her formula is made from raw milk.
So
But
you have a young daughter.
yeah, she technically, yeah, she's pretty young. She's like a little over a year old, but still eats formula and stuff. And she actually has a G tube, if you know what that is.
Oh yeah. So
Yeah,
she's
so
got
she
some
still
good
gets,
stuff.
yeah, yeah. So she was born with like a handful of things, and so yeah, we feed her this like really nice super nutrient or super nutritious like raw milk based formula. But I'm drinking like the next best thing. It's like A2, like organic A2, like slightly like low temperature pasteurized. But yeah, I drink a lot of milk.
Oh, I am a chocolate milk drinker, but I haven't been drinking it lately. Um, I
I
I've
love
been looking
chocolate milk.
Mhm.
I love chocolate milk too.
I've been looking for a raw milk supplier in South Carolina, and I know that we have one, but I'll ask
Hmm.
people and they're saying, no, we don't have raw milk. And I feel like they're saying it defensively, and I'm like, no, I want to buy some. Like, how do I buy the raw
Yeah.
milk?
Yeah. One of the biggest and best ones in South Carolina is a farm out of Star, South Carolina, which is like in the upstate, I think kind of near Greenwood, South Carolina. It's called Milky Way.
Hmm.
Um, that's like one of the, I feel like, most widely distributed ones. So your chances of being able to find it somewhere, I feel like, are like decent. And it's really good raw milk. And they actually also make a raw milk, like a chocolate milk, raw milk, which is funny because like I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the chocolate ingredients are in that, but um the raw milk we get from a local farm here in Charleston, and we just get it directly from this like chiropractor. He gets it from the farm and then like sells us the 1/2 gallons.
That's cool.
Yeah.
All right.
And it's really good. Have you ever had raw milk?
I think that I have, I know that
So
I've had, but I can't like remember exactly. And I know that I've been wanting to get it again. I think I had chocolate raw milk somewhere. Yeah, because I took the lid off and there was still like crap on the surface.
yeah,
And
like cream.
yeah, you had to shake it.
Yeah, it's just cream. You can drink that cream if you want.
Right, yeah. And I shook it up in there. I shouldn't have said crap,
Super
but
It's super buttery and creamy. Yeah, when I started drinking raw milk, I was like, oh, this stuff, it tastes, I don't know. I feel like I was kind of not scared, but was one of those people that was like, oh man, like raw milk, like straight out of the cow, like there's gonna be some, like I don't know. I definitely had like weird thoughts about it, but then when I had it for the first time, I was like, oh, this is delicious. Like it's so good. But also at the same time, like I was vegan for like almost I was vegan for like almost 10 years and like didn't drink, obviously like didn't drink milk for like a long, long, long time, like only like almond milk and then eventually like oat milk and things like that. So to be drinking just like actual good raw milk now, it's awesome.
What made you switch from being vegan?
Um, it kind of happened over I like kind of slowly started eating other things. So it didn't like happen all of a sudden and like instantly, especially because of how long I was doing it for. It was like hard for me to get back into like eating certain things, or it was hard to like imagine myself eating certain things. Um, but it happened over time. I want to say I probably started doing like fish first and then chicken and then all meats basically. But it kind of just happened. I mean, I was pretty fed up with how like inconvenient it felt when I was around like family and like family gatherings and things. Um and also just got to a place where, I mean, if I'm being completely honest, I didn't care. Like, I don't know, like I didn't care the way like I once thought I cared so much. Like, oh, I absolutely can't eat an animal or, eat any byproduct of an animal because like that poor animal or something. Like, I just didn't feel that same way anymore.
There's actually an interesting propaganda that happens with vegans, and they say, I've seen the video, we're the only adult mammals that drink another animal's milk. And they say that, and I knew that was propaganda because I saw it on TV, and then all the vegans say it. And then I mentioned it to someone who had a farm, and I said, "Have you heard about that propaganda that the vegans say?" And they were people that had now become very subversive to propaganda about our food. And they got very addled, they got very riled up, and they said, if you spill milk on the ground, any animal will lap it up. And that's exactly true. A dog,
Yeah,
a wolf, a cat, a possum, like it's just
that
that
is true.
they're just not available. We're the only grown mammals that cook our food. But if
Yeah.
you cook food, any animal will eat it. It's just
My
not available to them.
yeah, my response to that vegan propaganda would be, okay, so do we only drink human breast milk then? Like, is that what we're supposed to drink? If that's your argument,
And only
that would
as
be
a
my,
baby, we're the only
yeah,
adult mammals. Um,
yeah,
it's just a weird propaganda, and they can believe that, but I don't, our bodies are made to process it. Our bodies are made to process a lot of things. There's another propaganda that about marijuana being safer than alcohol. But our bodies don't process THC the way they process alcohol. THC stays in the fat, and your brain is a bunch of fat. It'll stay in there a long time. However, your liver is made to filter out poison. So as you drink alcohol, your liver filters it out, and there's not a mechanism for THC. So you can argue that your body's made to process alcohol. It's not made to process THC, and that's a propaganda that they don't think about very often.
well, I've never even heard that or thought of it that way.
I read it
It's
somewhere.
interesting.
Yeah, I read it
I
somewhere.
mean, it makes so much sense to me, though, honestly. I mean, even just as someone who has drank alcohol and both smoked weed, like even just that actual thought of like, the THC like staying in the fat and the like, I mean, it makes sense.
And another thing with THC, like you can feel like, okay, I'm getting high or I'm having gummies, everything's fine. I think I need a little bit more. And then it hits you and you're toasted for hours.
Yeah.
But alcohol, you can kind of like, okay, I can't have any more. And then you can kind of
Yeah.
stop. Or if you go a little
Yeah.
too much, to then drink
I mean,
water.
some people can. Some people can't do that.
Right. in print on principle, you can kind of gauge, and you can't gauge
Yeah,
with THC because it's like, and sometimes
you really can't.
you can smoke all night and then never get high.
I know, that's
And
crazy.
then the next time you do it, you're like, where are the
I
pills?
know.
You know?
You just yeah, you like never know what this certain weed that you're smoking is from, what it's gonna do. I mean, I guess you can know if you like grow it yourself or something. But even still, you can never know what it's really gonna do, you know? And I think that's maybe the most maybe actually one of the most like magical things about it is you like never really know what it's gonna do. So you should, you know, approach it with caution, but also like have a deep respect for it. That's how I feel about it, at least. You know, because I know what a gin and tonic with, you know, a 1.5 ounce shot of gin in it is going to do to me. You know, like I mean, over time, you know, like you know what a drink is going to do to you, especially if you have like the same drink a lot. You're like, oh, I know exactly how this is going to make you feel. But yeah, with weed, it's just like it's a gamble.
You're exactly right. There is a weird, I don't know if you've gotten to the age yet, but you'll get there. Whiskey will just one day betray you. You're like, oh, this is fine. This is fine. I've only had three. This is fine. Easy night. I'm staying in. I've had three. I started at 6. It's 11. I'm going to bed. And then you'll get up the next day and you'll feel completely fine. And then run to the bathroom and puke.
Oh, geez.
It'll
Yeah.
just one day.
I've never really I've never really had whiskey. Or I mean, I'm sure I've sipped it or tried it, but I have like a really, I feel like, I don't know, at least because I feel like for most other people I hear, most other people I know and see and observe, I feel like I have a really interesting relationship with like substances and stuff. But well, I will say this too. I've never ever been sick from drinking
Oh, wow. Good.
ever. So
Are you an of Irish descent?
possibly. I know my last name is very English. But yeah, I mean, possibly. Who knows?
I am Irish
I
descent.
think I mean, I think my descent is like, yeah, it is. What do you call that? I mean, Great Britain, or what do you call United Kingdom?
Yeah.
Or what do you call that whole island as a whole? Like all of it together? Doesn't it have a name for all of it together?
Is it? I guess it's Great Britain. Um,
I don't
I
know.
don't know
But
what the
yeah,
landmass is
I know
called.
my, I mean, I know my descent is from like that island. I know it's like, you know, Welsh, Scottish, English, like whatever all those countries are. I know that's definitely um at least yeah, at least that's where like a good bit of my descent is from. I also actually have um a fairly large, I don't know, what do you call it? Heritage descent or whatever all actually also comes from Native Americans in the Carolinas, you know.
So Wheatley, it probably has something to do with wheat, and and there are always barley fields and stuff. The Irish, I think just a portion of Ireland is part of Great Britain. We're being such Americans right now, not knowing the geography of that place.
I
But
know.
but who cares? We're number one, at least for the time being. I don't need to know them. But but I did note I'm Irish, and I don't know if it's because I'm Irish, but I noticed that even one glass of wine, I cannot write well the next day. It makes me do so many leaps in my head that it just feels like I'm just struggling. I tried different methods one day. I was experimenting. Like, what
Hmm.
alcohol can I have and still write the next day? How much can I have? Because I can't have any if I want to write it all that day. So then I tried different bourbons. I tried, brandy and just different things that seemed cool and literary. And, I could talk on the phone with my friends in other states and, and just be drinking and having cocktail hour with them. And then I wanted to make sure that I could always write. And so I started experimenting and I found out that just one glass of wine, I can't. I've said the story twice now. Sorry for story repeat, but the so then I just said, you know what? I always want to write. I don't have a book yet. So I don't want to do anything that's going to stop that. So I just stopped drinking alcohol in March. And then um, caffeine was making me feel a little bit weird. And so I kind of cut back and cut back, and that was very difficult. That was much, I wasn't addicted to alcohol, but I was addicted to caffeine. And it took about 9 days for my brain to get back normal. And now I'm normal and I'm writing every day. So,
So that's awesome. And so like wait, right now you do not have alcohol at all. You haven't since March.
right.
And then also you've cut out caffeine completely.
I'm like a Mormon, but I'm not. So,
Wow. Yeah.
well,
That's
I've cut out
awesome.
caffeinated coffee. If I'm around, if I have an option for a soda, I'll take a soda. Um, and a Coca-Cola is always going to have caffeine in it, but I don't get a Coke every single time I go out.
Hmm.
My
Yeah.
mom has those little Pepsi cans at her house, and so I'll have that. But then
Yeah,
sometimes
those
I'm
little
like,
tiny ones.
yeah, and that doesn't count.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
But my brain does feel a little different. It feels like I have more control, and I think that I see more moments throughout the day.
Hmm.
If I had coffee in the mornings, my day went by like that. And I think everything was just moving so fast, I couldn't really focus on any one thing. And now that it doesn't race like that, my day, I feel a little bit more control of it. I also don't have as much tension in my throat either.
Yeah. I feel I've always been a coffee drinker, for a really, really long time actually. Um, like I don't know. I feel like I started drinking coffee fairly young. I feel like, but it's so weird because I still drink it every day for the most part. Like I have a coffee every single day. Um, if I don't have a coffee, I notice that I feel different. Like I can tell I didn't have a coffee. And then when I don't know, I guess this is gonna be like almost like a duh moment, I feel like. But like when I do have a coffee, I don't I don't feel like I feel it. Like I don't feel like I'm getting any sort of like, oh, I'm really caffeinated. But then when I don't have it, I'm like, oh man, this is rough. So I mean, I guess that's like exactly like I said, a dub moment. It's like, oh, okay, clearly you have a very like big dependency on caffeine because like it feels normal. You feel normal on it, but then when you don't have it, like you feel dysfunctional. So, but I mean, I don't know. There are days where I've gone without coffee and I mean, I can get through the day, but it's the morning time is little rough. I think too, I feel like too also just because of like the nature of my everyday life. And so, I'm a teacher, so I'm like up really early. I'm up when the sun comes up. I'm at work, like working by 7 a.m.
Oh my God.
Which is pretty early, and then on top of that, you're like almost immediately socializing, um, with children, with other, coworkers, with other teachers. So I think that just has a big part to do with it too, I think because I feel like, on the weekends I can wake up and not have a coffee immediately, but because the fact that it's the weekend and I'm just like, laying low and like my wife and daughter are around, but we're not necessarily like having social hour the second we wake up. And so like it feels different, but yeah, something about like I guess yeah, maybe something about like needing caffeine to just immediately hop into like being social is maybe like a big part of it.
The
Because I
routine.
would definitely prefer to like have like an hour or two, if like at least an hour, if not an hour or two of just like silence in the morning. Like I'd love to just like be to myself, to my thoughts, maybe listen to some thought-provoking music if I wanted to, or something of that nature, rather than just like immediately jumping into like saying good morning to every child you see for an hour. Like it can be a bit exhausting.
It sounds like it. There have been times when I wanted to be a teacher, but that kind of grind. is a little bit spooky.
It's a lot, dude. It is so exhausting. Like, it is such an exhausting job. I mean, I get home at 3 p.m. every day, and I am like so tired, like so insanely tired. And it's not even that I'm like not getting decent sleep, because I mean, I get a good amount of sleep. I feel like I sleep, you know, somewhere between like 6 to 8 hours every night, which I know six isn't super great, but like six is fine for me. Like I can be fine on 6 hours of sleep. But like, yeah, when I get home from work, like, and it's also not every day either that I'm this exhausted, but like, especially if I had like a long day of just like, you know, having to deal with lots of, children with behaviors and things like that. Like, dude, I'm so exhausted when I get home. Like, it's rough.
So that's why you have to type your poems on the notes app. Are you doing it in school ever?
Actually, yeah, I do a lot of things at school. Because yeah, I'm actually technically an assistant at my school, but I'm at a Montessori school. Um, if anyone, I mean, I'm not going to assume anyone knows what Montessori school is like, but so I'll just say in a Montessori classroom, um, the assistant to the teacher is like a vital role. Like Montessori and like that type of education, Maria Montessori, the lady who invented it, um, that was from day one. It was like the teacher always has an assistant or like an aide. And basically the reason why is it's because it's to be like an aide to to be an extra aide and extra adult for the children in the classroom, because the Montessori classroom is meant to be like a classroom that's very um like child led, and you're meant to be like provoking, or not provoking, but you're meant to be like instilling independence into the child. So like having adults in the classroom are important. So I do a lot, and I have a very vital role in my classroom. I have a lot of responsibilities and things that I do, but at the same time, I am just the assistant. So whenever there are like, say the kids are at like PE or art or library or whatever, like that little break time is like break time for me to truly like enjoy a break. Like my lead teacher, she might, have to spend that break time like grading papers and things like that, or like not grading papers, but like giving, marking things and stuff. But a lot of those times for me are like truly breaks. So yeah, I do some writing at school. um, Sometimes I'll edit things at school, like on my phone. Sometimes I'll sneak off and try to like submit into like really quick little submission windows. Um, but yeah, I do stuff at school for sure. I probably should do less of it because I feel like lately I've been really distracted at school. But
Do you have a story published that you started on the notes app at school that you could read to us?
let me think. Um, I do have a, that would be hard to read to you actually though. I don't really at the moment, but um I'll just share this story then instead. I did recently get an acceptance from had, have has had. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not.
Okay. It's like this online mag that has like these really like notoriously quick windows. A lot of times they have like themed calls and things like that. But anyways, recently they had an open call, or like an open submission for comics. So for not comics as in like, oh, like a comic like funny, but like, comic drawings. And I was like, okay, like, I mean, I'll give this a go. Um, I, so before I ever got into writing, I'd say really like as a kid and stuff, and even, after like school age and stuff too, I was always like a notorious doodler. Like I always doodled and drew on everything and like drew in notebooks and stuff like that, sketchbooks and things like that. But anyways, so this little call came up recently, and I kind of sort of like channeled this like older, I mean not older, but like this past version of myself that would like always do doodles and stuff. And I made this little doodle. I like do a lot of like line drawing type doodles, and I made this. I need to stop saying the word doodle, but I made this drawing, this comic, and it went along with a haiku. I wrote like a haiku that went along with it, and I submitted it to this open call, and it got accepted. And I drew that. I drew it. I copied it on the copier and everything at school. And I literally did it at school while my kids were also like basically doing the same thing. I mean, not the same thing, but like it was like really recently and at a lot of my older kids. Oh, well, so in my classroom, there's three different age levels or three different grade levels. And my older kids were out of the room doing like state testing. Like they have to go do like, this certain testing to meet state standards, that kind of stuff. You remember PACT testing
Yeah.
when we were younger? Essentially that, but it's not called that anymore. It's called something different. But anyways, my older kids were out of the room and my younger kids were in the room and I had to keep them occupied, but they could not go on their Chromebooks, which is hard for kids nowadays, especially to keep them quiet at the same time. So I was just like, all right, we're just gonna, hang out. We just need to be really quiet and we're just gonna like free read, like, you can read books and you can draw. And so a bunch of kids were like drawing and doodling and, making, you know, masterpieces with like colored pencils and crayons and stuff. And here I was just like doing my own little doodle, um, or my own little drawing.
Yes, and read
What
it.
else? Okay, I mean I can read it. Yeah, it's a haiku. It's very, very short, obviously. Let me find it real quick. I recently went through my computer and like organized everything, and it's been so nice. Like all my writing and stuff. I just have so many little things, like so many, little poems and all that stuff. And I like finally organized all of it. Okay, so it says, uh, should I read it or should I say the title of it? No, I'm not going to say the title of it. It's a haiku. Fell in love last night, your face like sun in my eyes as I drive to work.
And what's the comic look like? You don't
Very
have to show it
simple.
to us, but
It's just like I said, it's like line drawings. It's like the top one is like a view of the moon and me like descending a bridge towards the beach with like the moon. And then the second image is like the sun rising over like the waterway, like like marsh waterway. Uh, and me like, and the view is like of me looking out my passenger side window. And then the last one is an image of me just like ascending a bridge that like kind of just looks like it like peaks or like ascends into the sky or like ascends into nothing.
where can people watching this see and read your work?
I've had a piece published on rejection letters. I've had a piece published on Hobart. I've had a piece published on this kind of smaller site called heavyathletics.us is their URL. Um, I actually had this really cool piece, or I think it's really cool. It's like one of my favorite things I've ever made. Um, but I had like a script published. I like basically like tried or not tried, but I wrote a poem, what in my head or what in my yeah, what in my head was a poem. I wrote a poem but as a script. And that got published by this really cool, very new, small online submission, like open submission mag called Swamp. And then I had a poem published recently actually on Don't Submit. If you know what that is, Don't
I
Submit
think I've
Lit.
heard of it.
My poem on there I really, really like. Um I would be more than happy to read that one.
Read it.
Uh and then and then I have that one coming out on Had, like which should be honestly it should be like any day now, I'm thinking. But I want to say this first before I if I do or before I read that other one. Um so speaking of like school or how you're asking me like do you ever write at school? I do write at school. I actually have actually, that one story I sent you and we like kind of bounced back and forth, that poem? I wrote that at school. Um I wrote that at school and I mean I've definitely written stuff at school, but a lot of my published stuff have been like in random places. Or written in random places or not even random places, but just not written at school. Um but at this uh script thing I was speaking about, or this piece or the script that I wrote is based on it is like loosely based on like some experiences at school. It's titled Let's Stay Children Forever is the title of it. But that would be weird to read because it's a script. I mean, I don't know. Actually, I could read it, but it's like super super short or super super short for a script. But yeah, I'll read the poem that I had or that I had recently published on Don't Submit. Does that sound good?
Oh, that's great. Yes.
Okay, cool. The title of it is When I Hear Gunshots Outside. When I hear gunshots outside, I don't run or bury my head in the pillow. I don't regret a thing or imagine how things could have been different. I don't lament you or examine the entry and exit wounds. I don't imagine what you'd look like now, or even for a second think of your widow's peak. I don't obsess over memories or whether or not the snakes were real. I don't hide from the hurricane or ever let go of my mother's hand. I don't flush the scratch CDs or listen to Galapagos on repeat. I don't palpate the tailgate or leave the garage door open all night. I don't brush my teeth in the morning or consider putting my Pop Tarts in the toaster. I don't make a peep or blame you for flipping the four-wheeler over. I don't break up the fight or cover the hole in the wall with a skate poster. When I hear gunshots outside, I recite a prayer or think of a prayer that makes me feel less alone.
All right. The Paul Leslie Hour, which is a cool podcast that is stationed in Charleston also. He always recommends letting the guests take over the final portion of the interview to say whatever is on their heart or mind, knowing that it could have the potential to reach anyone and everyone in the far corners of the world, even that little island off of India where they have no technology and kill people who get on there. If they were to hear what you're about to say, what is it that you want to say? The show is yours.
Oh, you really set that one up.
No pressure.
Um, Man, I really don't know. I feel like I should just really keep it simple and say, I don't know. I think as a human, um, as a human with like a critical mind and with thoughts, like coherent thoughts, um, I feel like the most worthwhile thing you could do with your life is to try to understand love and just like not even just like being in love or, or I don't know, I guess like the immediate images you think of when you think of love, but just trying to understand love in a way that um embodies like all of humanity, I guess, if that makes sense. Trying to just, and whatever love is in your language, whatever that word is, whatever language you speak, like trying to understand that word and how to live it, and how to think how to think about it before you act, how to think about it before you speak, how to approach all other living things, all all other living things, but more specifically, all other humans, um, from a place of love, no matter what, like no matter what age they are, no matter what their appearance is, um, how no matter how they physically look, no matter how they present themselves, uh, like mentally, um, but just like, yeah, just like slow down and try to think about love all the time.
Thank
That'd be what I would say.
thank you, MD Wheatley.
Thank you.